Today, we're going to be talking about common misconceptions that people have about photography. Let's begin. If this is your first time on the channel, welcome. Nice to have you here. If you're a returning subscriber, what's up? What's good? So today, we are going to be discussing some common misconceptions that I feel like people have about photography. Some of these I found, and some of these I was just thinking about. I was like, what did I think when I first started in photography? And what are some things that when I've talked to people, what are some things that I feel like people truly believe about photography that's just not true, or kind of true, or kind of, yes, true, but they kind of need to know a little bit more information. So those are the things that we're going to be talking about today. Before we dive in, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to make sure you don't miss any of our future videos. And without further ado, let's get started. Number one, Canon versus Nikon. So it's a common misconception that I hear because Canon and Nikon tend to be the biggest camera brands that are talked about, that you kind of have to pick between Canon and Nikon. So this is just honestly a common misconception. I'm gonna blow this out of the water right now because I'm shooting on a Sony. So that's about it. I shot on Nikon historically in the past, mainly because it was the first camera that I just shot on because that was what was available to me. But honestly, if I was going to go back in time and kind of change it, I probably actually would start on Canon because Canons are better for video when you're comparing just straight up Nikons versus cameras across the plethora of cameras that they have. But also, don't discount other brands because other brands of cameras are doing phenomenal work. For example, Sony. So, you never know. Also, different cameras do different camera brands and different cameras specialize in specific things. So, since I'm trying to shoot photo and video, I moved from primarily shooting only on Nikons to shooting on something with better autofocus for video at a cheaper budget, which would be something like a Canon or a Sony. So why I'm landing on Sony. So it's all about what you want and all about kind of your personal preference and what you're on, as the time has progressed. So yeah, don't get stuck on the Canon versus Nikon game because there's other options, and not only are there other options, but you just have to find the fit that's right for you. The second misconception is that shooting on automatic is bad. So I started photography when I was in high school, and so I took photojournalism class, which was basically like yearbook. And so we were fortunately taught all of the camera settings and stuff, and we were encouraged, obviously, to shoot manual, but I'm not gonna say that I always shot on manual because I'm not gonna say that I picked up everything as quickly as it was necessarily put down, and I wasn't able to necessarily move into understanding it all and how it all worked as quickly as I would have wanted to. So of course I started on automatic. I think the most important thing when shooting on automatic, because I would encourage beginner people to shoot on automatic, but I would encourage, if you are a little confused about how the settings work and interact with each other, if you go on automatic and you pay attention to what the camera is changing depending on the lighting settings you're in, that's an easy way to get kind of like a cheat sheet of kind of what happens. So for example, if you go outside and it's really, really dark and the camera bumps up the ISO, well, now you kind of have an understanding of like, okay, when it's dark, I need more ISO because apparently the camera did that and that's what it did. So you can kind of take the answers that automatic gives to you and understand how that can be applied so that when you move to manual, you will have already had all the answers like previously. Now I will say that sometimes you have to watch automatic because it will make decisions sometimes that you wouldn't necessarily want to do, like tweaking certain settings when other things could get you to a better result. And so I'll be making videos obviously on like different camera settings for different scenarios and like the basics of camera settings and everything, but automatic can be a very good way to kind of help you understand the basics if you just take what it's giving you and apply it to what you would do manually. The third misconception is that you have to have a really good camera in order to take great photos, and in tandem that real photographers don't use their phone. Okay, so if you watched last week's video, you know that this photo right here was actually taken on a camera that I got from a pawn shop for $68. For $68? For $68. So automatically that conception is blown out of the water. Like, Obviously, you can make good work if you have a camera that's maybe not the highest quality, that shoots with the highest megapixels, like all of that things. Those things don't necessarily matter to an extent. And at the same time, while I'm a photographer and I barely use my phone, shooting with your phone is not an impossible thing, because there are some people who are older than me that when they started, the technology that they had was worse than the iPhone that is in your pocket. So if you think about that, some of the pros started when they were younger, shooting with things that were worse quality than the phone you have in your pocket now. Now, if you're thinking about that, you're like, oh, so I have technology than some of the people who are doing that. Like, yeah, you do. You have access to that. So it's like, don't get caught up necessarily in what other people are saying is professional. If you can make it work for you, and that's what you have right now, don't let that stop you. Don't let other people's perceptions of what you're doing stop you if you're producing good work. Because if I had let the idea that I was shooting with a camera that I got for $68 stop me, then I never would have moved up and gotten better, because I constantly would have been put down by the fact that my camera here wasn't great. But you can produce great things with a phone or a camera that is not the highest quality, and I'm actually going to be doing a photo challenge at some point that involves shooting an entire photo shoot with a cell phone and a cheaper camera, just to prove this very fact. The fourth misconception is that you have to have a lot of gear in order to be professional. Now, I absolutely hate this misconception because it's just straight up not true. You can produce great content if you only have a camera. If you only have a camera and one light. If you only have a light in your cell phone. Like, there's so many different ways that you can arrange things. You don't necessarily, in photo and video, you don't have to have the most advanced things. You don't have to have the most name brand things, because I don't have everything that's name brand. Most of my things are not name brand. I've got like, Sony camera and like an iPhone and different things, but I've got like an LED light lighting me right now. I don't even know if there's a softbox lighting this whole back thing. I have no idea what brand that is. I don't even remember. I got it like 4 years ago and it's still kicking, before I even had like an office, a studio, any of that stuff. Before I was even taking myself seriously as like professional, I had these lights and I'm still using them. Like, you don't have to have the most professional gear in order to make some great stuff. And I use this stuff all the time. So I feel like it's more about the utilization of the things that you have that makes things work for you. In tandem with that, if you have the option to invest in a bunch of gear or invest in good lighting, please, please, please invest in good lighting. A good shot can be absolutely ruined by bad light, but a bad setup can be saved by lighting it the correct way. Number 5 is a quick one. A misconception is that you should use the flash that is built onto the top of the camera because it's there. Nah, I almost never use the flashes built on top of the camera because it's nearly impossible to control. It's so much harder than using like an off-camera flash, and so you almost never use it. Although I will say I have had cases where my off-camera flash died, and I did have to use, because it was like getting dark and the sun was going down, and I had to use the on-camera flash to save me for like a couple photos. But even still, I ended up having to diffuse it with some ghetto rig setup. It was a mess, but I almost never use it. So I would encourage you, if you are leaning more towards having to use the on-camera flash or learning how to just shoot in natural light, I would more persuade you to shoot towards natural light, because that on-camera flash is just gonna throw you off, buddy. There are certain cases where you use it, but almost none of them are popular or you'll come across. You'd be better off learning off-camera flash. So start with natural lighting and don't even worry about trying to, master that on-camera flash, because no one does. You can't master it. Number 6, everything you do has to be original. Now, I know a lot of people get caught up in whether copying is inspiration, or it's okay, or it's not okay. Here's my stance on it. Anytime you are starting a new hobby, you're going to need some blueprint to follow. Whether that's when I learned how to play piano, I learned how to mimic certain songs, and I listened to how other people played and shaped my playing style to kind of how they did that. You have to watch in order to develop what you want. So I don't feel like there's anything wrong with taking from the style that someone does. The problem becomes when you're doing exactly the same thing as other people and not just like taking what they do and maybe trying it a couple. Like I can understand if you like take a photo that someone has done and try and like, you know, recreate that photo or recreate like the color scheme to like find your like color style, like editing style. But the problem becomes when you are literally copying exactly what someone is doing. I'm in like a Facebook group and someone was talking about how there was a photographer in their city who literally would mimic everything their business did. So if they announced, hey, I'm doing mini sessions this week, the next week the person would be like, hey, I'm doing mini sessions this week. If that person got like a new couch and a new like whatever like kind of light, that person the next month would be like, hi, I just got this new furniture and I've upgraded all my lights, and like it was honestly down to a T. That is annoying. Don't do that. But if you are needing inspiration or like to understand how something works or anything, there's nothing wrong with looking at how other people do things and trying to apply that to your own thing, especially if you're newer and you're trying to find your own style. Number 7, giving unedited photos after a session is a normal thing. Okay, so I never do this. I never give clients unedited photos, and I'll explain why. Unedited photos from a session are not a reflection of the complete display of your work. And if you make it a habit of giving people unedited photos, what's gonna happen is the quality of your work is never gonna be fully displayed when clients are seeing what you've done. So if a client posts your unedited work one day and then your edited work another day, it's gonna be confusing as to where your level of like where your standard is, because no one kind of knows what your style is because they're seeing both unedited and edited. So I never give out my unedited photos. I know, so I've seen some photographers who are either less experienced or I don't know, but they make the decision to give the unedited photos, and I that's absolutely like a no for me. And I know a lot of photographers as well, that's an absolute no, because that's not what you want going out into the world with your name on it. You want your finished work with the decisions that you chose to make in post. Like that's what you want everyone to see. And sometimes clients don't understand that, and you just have to understand, hey, yeah, no, this isn't a reflection of the work that I want displayed to the world. So here's a list of things we can do. You can either, you know, request more edits or like, you know, whatever, or this is just what you get, or, you know, whatever. But I guess the explanation sometimes has to be explained better, because some client, I've had some clients ask for the unedited photos, and I'm like, no. That's not what we do here. We don't do that. So that's a misconception that I was like, no, we're not normalizing giving everyone all the photos. We're not normalizing sending someone 1,000 photos from a session because I was spraying and you think that was great. Like, no, that's not what we're doing. We give select edits. Speaking of photos from a session, number 8 is that taking less photos during a session makes you a pro. So like the idea of this is like, if you're more of a professional, then you're like only have to take a specific, like exactly the amount of photos. Like if this person gets 12 photos back from their session, then you only have to snap maximum 15 images, because no, we don't, no, that's not what we do. That's not what I do, because one, I'm not perfect, so I want to make sure that I get it right when I get it right. And the more options you have when you're going back in post is way better than having the exact number you need, and then one of the shots is blurry and you're like, thought it was good and when I was out in the field, but now I can see that we're stuck. Like, you don't want that. So like, don't be afraid to shoot more. Don't be afraid to check yourself if you like feel like maybe I don't know. That doesn't make you less of a pro. That just makes you making sure it just reinforces double checking yourself. I feel like that's a better habit to get in than giving yourself false hope and false confidence and then getting back and having a problem and then having to tell your client, I don't have the exact photos you need. I would rather come back and have way more and then have to narrow it down than way less and cry. That's just. The 9th misconception is that you need a good location to take good photos. So this is just absolutely not true. Nothing necessarily makes, well, some locations are better than other locations, yes, but you can always find some inspiration in something, which is one of the things that I love about kind of shooting at places that I don't necessarily know. I have done a photo shoot before with someone that wanted to shoot next to a dumpster. It's happened. Like, it was literally, I will say, granted, it was a comedian, and it was actually friend Seth Fox. He passed away recently, but he wanted to shoot next to a dumpster, and that is one of my favorite memories of like being with him. We were shooting out in Noda, and it was like on the train tracks, and then we like walked across the street, and it was like, I'm gonna shoot next to that dumpster, and we did it. And it's like, it's not the best photo or whatever, but it's like, you can still make something like a dumpster look good or better than just like a literal pile of trash. You can still make it visually appealing. You can still do, you know, whatever. And we ended up using other things around that location, but it's like, normally no one would walk behind a building to shoot with a dumpster. But we did it, and then we found this location that we ended up using with the lights and things in the background. But if we hadn't walked back to see the dumpster, we wouldn't have found the other thing. So it's like certain locations that you might find not ideal at shooting at all actually may lean themselves to you being more creative in the end and finding new things that you wouldn't have necessarily stumbled across. So don't ever discount bad locations just because they might not be the most convenient idea. Challenge yourself and try to shoot in locations that you wouldn't normally shoot. The next one, number 10, goes along with the previous one. You need a studio to shoot studio quality photography. And this also goes the same for like shooting video. I honestly feel like one of the best qualities in being a very, very versatile photographer is being able to take a location that may not be ideal for someone else in like if it's like an indoor location, and turning it into something that feels like absolutely like, wow, where did you shoot that? Or like, how did you do that? Or I never would have guessed like you would shoot at that angle to do this. And this is why it goes in hand with the previous thing, where it's like places that people might discount may actually be an advantage because they haven't been looked at with this new imagination. People just discount it like completely. For example, I run like a lot of Facebook ads. And so one of the first Facebook ads that I actually ran this year was back in May, when I was doing like discounted sessions because I was trying to bounce back from like COVID and all of these different things. I shot this video ad in my bedroom in a space that was like not much at all. It was like maybe 5 feet worth of space, but it looks like, you know, I'm shooting in this all black room with a desk and different things. Like, no, it's very tight space. It's a very, very tight space, but you can't tell because I know how to work the angles and different things. You don't need the most space. You don't need the ultimate setup. You don't need that. I've also done in-home sessions with people where I am able to utilize their home and make it look better than they had imagined because I'm just good at, you know, using angles and like making the light work in the specific space that you want to. So it's all about really the imagination and what you're able to do with the space, but you don't have to necessarily have the biggest studio space or even a studio space in order to shoot some quality in studio feeling photography. I even went to Boone at the beginning of March and I shot like multiple photo shoots with my friend Anna inside of her home, like in her living room. I set up the backdrop, had the lights going. We were shooting for hours and like the photos are phenomenal and it feels like I was in studio. Nah, I don't have a studio in Boone. She was like, hey, you can come to my apartment, and that's exactly what we did. And so, you know, utilizing what you have is sometimes the best thing you can do. I'm bad at counting, but I believe this is number 11. This also goes in hand with the last two. There's a misconception that planning your photo shoots is everything. Now, when it comes to video, I will say I am the king of storyboarding something. If it's like a music video or something like that's got a lot of moving parts, I'm the king of storyboarding it. But for photo shoots, I almost never plan ahead. If it's something that I've like absolutely never shot before, then yes, I would like, you know, look up inspiration ideas or kind of like know what I want to do ahead of time. But if it's like a family session or like a couple session or something different and I've never shot at the location, I'm like, all right, we'll figure it out when we get there, because that's a part of my process of like kind of being inspired in the moment. And if you are constantly over planning and like knowing exactly what you want to do when you get there, it's not leaving time to be inspired by the location, by the couple, by like the mood, by the lighting, by blah, blah, whatever. If you've planned everything to a T, you're leaving no room for outside inspiration. Once again, it's also nice to challenge yourself to try and shoot in spaces that someone may not like have necessarily shot before. Like, you may not have necessarily shot before, or people might not expect a photo shoot to be done. Example, the dumpster, or like, any case. There have been plenty of times where I've scheduled shoots out of town with people and they pick the location and I've never been to the park, I've never been to like this area of town, like whatever, and I have no clue what to expect when I get there, but we're still able to get good images based on whatever I find there, whether it's there's some trees that are like leading down the sidewalk that I think look really cool when they stand in front of them. Cool, we'll shoot that. I've never been to this location, but boom, this is the photo I got here. Or, different things. You never know what's gonna happen in the moment. So it's sometimes best to like plan loosely if you absolutely have to plan. But once again, challenge yourself to kind of just shoot in the moment and be inspired by what's around you. And finally, the last misconception that I have for you is number 12. People love to think that photographers can just do everything in post. Like, I'll be on a photo shoot and somebody will be like, yeah, you can take my stomach and you can do it. It's like, no, sometimes you can't. No, I mean, you can, but not for what you're paying or the budget that we've set aside for this thing. Like, it's not what I do. That's not what we do at this level of photography right now. So it's very interesting for people to kind of understand that, like, I can take someone out of the background of your photo way easier than I can bring in your stomach. Like, those are two different things. And I know in your head, it's magic all the way around, but it's not the same. And it's hard to kind of explain to people the difference between some of the things, but it's like, even as like a photographer, as a beginner photographer, eventually, or I'm sure like you've seen how other people can like do different things and manipulate photos and posts and everything and make things look completely different. It's like, well, yes, almost everything can be done in Photoshop or Lightroom or a combination of the two. The question is what your client is paying worth you spending that much time trying to do that thing to every photo or whatever? So basically, since you know that everything can basically be done in post no matter what it is, the question then becomes, do I want to have to do everything in post? Is what my client is paying worth me, doing all of these extra steps in post? Or would it be more beneficial for my time if I make sure that my photos look as good as I can possibly make them before I take them into post? So the post is just like an enhancement more than like the actual workshop where you're doing the majority of the work. Basically, the way I view doing things in post is, don't make post the make or break for your photos. Make shooting it in the moment, make that, work on perfecting your craft there, and then let post just be, that little boost or that enhancement or whatever it is. Especially if you're shooting like normal types of photography, like, family portraits or like senior portrait or like just normal portrait photography. Now, if you're doing like composite photography, that's a whole completely different thing. That's all post, that's all editing and things. So that's like a different world. But for the most part, you still want to make sure that when you're doing everything in post, you're making it as perfect as possible and you're understanding all the concepts, so that when you take it, later, you're not as worried and you're not having to work as much magic. But those are all of the misconceptions that I could think of, that I found that like really interested me to talk about today. I hope you got something out of this video. And if there's more things that you want to hear about, or you have any questions about anything, leave it in the comments below. Hit me up on Instagram. I'm always talking to people. Like, just don't be shy to basically voice if you have a concern, or you're like, hey, I think you should talk about this, or hey, I don't agree with this, or hey, I agree with this. Make it a conversation. That's always what I want. I want it to be a conversation, and I need you to make that happen. But like I said, follow me on all my social media to keep the conversation going. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to make sure you get notified when I make videos every single week. And don't forget to keep creating and be yourself. I'll see you next week.